Dad's silent revenge.
After 5 years of living in my house, my son and his wife won $75 million in the lottery. That same day, she pushed me out the door. Get out to a nursing home. We don't need your charity anymore. I smiled. Dear, did you check the name on the other ticket? My name is Charles Thompson. Most folks call me Charlie. I'm 62 years old, a retired insurance adjuster. And for the past 8 years since my wife Martha passed, I've been living alone in our white 2-story house on Maple Street in Denton, Ohio. Martha died of a heart attack in 2016, and after that, it was just me, the house, and the sound of the wind through the oak trees we planted when we first moved in. For 3 years after Martha's death, I managed just fine on my own. I had my pension, my small garden, my neighbor George, and enough common sense to know that being lonely and being helpless aren't the same thing. But when my son Tim called me in the fall of 2019 saying he and his wife Jenny had hit some financial trouble, his construction business had slowed down, they'd fallen behind on their mortgage, I didn't think twice about it. Come stay with me, I said. This house is too big for one person anyway. That was my first mistake. Not loving my son, that was never wrong. The mistake was not asking more questions about Jenny. She walked into my house that first day with her chin tilted up like she was evaluating whether the air was good enough to breathe. Jenny was 34, sharp-featured, worked in real estate, and had this talent for giving compliments that somehow made you feel smaller. What a quaint little place, she said, looking around at the living room Martha and I had decorated over 20 years. I showed her to the guest room upstairs. I'd even bought new curtains and painted the walls the week before they arrived. Those first few months weren't too bad. Tim helped me with yard work. Jenny pitched in for groceries sometimes. We had Sunday dinners together. I told myself it was working out fine, but I'd been investigating insurance claims for 35 years. You learn to read the signs. By the second year, I started noticing things. Jenny rearranged my kitchen without asking. She moved Martha's photo from the mantel to a shelf in the hallway. When I put it back, she moved it again. On phone calls with her friends, I heard her refer to the house as our place. She complained about my TV shows, the smell of my morning coffee, what time I got up. Tim said nothing. He's always been a gentle kid, maybe too gentle, just like his mother used to say. By the 3rd year, Jenny stopped knocking before coming into my room. By the 4th year, she started talking to me like I was a child, slow, loud, with that fake bright smile you use on someone you think is losing it. I kept quiet. I watched patience was something 35 years of insurance work had taught me. Then, in the spring of 2024, I did something I'd never done before. I bought a lottery ticket. Not because I was desperate, I'm not that kind of guy. I bought it because my neighbor George dared me to at the Quick Mart on Route 9, and because it was only $2, and because sometimes at 62, you do small things just to feel like anything's possible. I bought 2 tickets on impulse. Kept one, gave the other to Tim that evening when he walked through the kitchen. He thanked me without looking up from his phone. I forgot all about it. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Tim had checked his ticket, the one I gave him, and found 5 matching numbers plus the bonus ball. The prize was $75 million. The house became a place I didn't recognize. Phone calls, lawyers, a financial advisor who showed up in a suit that cost more than my car. Jenny floated around with this brightness that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with power. She ordered new furniture without asking me. She talked about investments and properties and our future, except the word we never seemed to include me. I sat at my kitchen table drinking my morning coffee and watched it all happen. Then came that Tuesday morning. I was standing at the counter slicing an apple when Jenny walked in wearing a silk robe I'd never seen, poured herself coffee from my pot, and said without looking at me, "Charlie, we've been talking. You'd probably be more comfortable somewhere with people your own age. There's a nice assisted living place across town. We'll cover the cost." Of course, I set down the knife. This is my house. Something flashed across her face. Then she smiled that fake smile. Not for much longer. "We don't need your charity anymore, Charlie. We don't need you." She paused. Tim agrees. "Pack what you need." She walked out of my kitchen. My kitchen, where Martha and I used to sit every New Year's Eve with hot cider, talking about the year ahead. I stood there for a long moment. Then I smiled, because Jenny had made one big mistake, and she didn't know it yet. She'd never asked about the other ticket. I walked to my bedroom and sat on Martha's side of the bed. That's where I always went when I needed to think clearly. The habit had stuck even after her scent faded from the pillow years ago. Let me be honest about what I felt in those first minutes. I felt scared. Not the sharp fear you get in a crisis, but that dull fear that comes with being older and feeling like the world has reorganized itself around you while you weren't paying attention. I was 62 years old. I had a pension of $2,100 a month. My car was a 2015 Honda with 140,000 miles on it. And the two people I'd sheltered and fed for 5 years had just told me my services were no longer required. Was I surprised? Part of me wasn't. The signs had been building for 2 years, but knowing a storm is coming doesn't make the rain less cold. I made myself think practically, old habit from work. When emotions threaten to take over, you reach for facts and structure. Fact 1. I own this house. The deed says Charles Thompson, recorded at Denton County. I bought it with Martha in 1995. When she died, it passed to me entirely. No one had asked me to sign anything. No one had offered to buy me out. No one had the legal right to kick me out. Jenny's threat about not for much longer wasn't law. It was just a threat. But threats from people with $75 million aren't the same as threats from people without money. I knew what wealth could do. Lawyers, delays, harassment, they could claim I wasn't mentally competent. They could say I couldn't maintain the property. They could make living here so miserable I'd leave on my own. I sat with the fear until it became something I could handle. Then I got up and went to the desk in the corner, Martha's old writing desk that I'd inherited from her mother. I opened the bottom drawer. The lottery ticket was there in a white envelope, exactly where I'd put it 3 weeks ago and then forgotten about it. I took it out and looked at it. 7 numbers printed in black ink on cheap paper. Numbers that matched, I now knew for certain, a $75 million prize, because the ticket I'd given Tim was number 2 from the same purchase. This was ticket number 1. Here's what nobody in that house knew. In Ohio, lottery prizes belong to whoever can prove they bought the winning ticket. You can't claim a prize on a ticket you didn't purchase unless ownership is legally established. I had bought both tickets. I had the receipt. I hadn't signed the ticket I gave Tim, and he, in all his excitement, hadn't submitted it for official processing yet. His lawyer was still looking into tax implications. That meant there was still time. I knew I needed help, and not the family kind. Family had just shown me exactly what it was worth. I needed someone with legal knowledge who wasn't invested in being polite about what I was facing. I called George. George Williams had been my neighbor for 15 years and my closest friend since Martha died. He was 69, drove a pickup truck, grew tomatoes that put mine to shame, and had zero patience for nonsense. He answered on the second ring. "Charlie, you never call before noon unless something's wrong." "Something's wrong," I said. I told him everything. The tickets, the scene in the kitchen, Jenny's words, the $75 million, my ticket in the drawer. I spoke steadily, the way I used to report claims to supervisors. When I finished, George was quiet for a moment. "You got a lawyer?" "Not since Martha and I bought the house. My nephew Dick is in family law up in Columbus. Good guy, doesn't waste time. Can I call him today?" "Yes. Don't tell Tim or Jenny anything," George said. "Not one word. If they ask where you're going, you're visiting a friend." "Can you do that?" "I investigated insurance fraud for 35 years, I said. "I think I can keep a secret from a 34-year-old. George laughed, and for the first time that morning, something in my chest loosened up. The plan was simple. Find a lawyer. Figure out what I actually owned and what rights I had. Then answer the question that had been circling in my mind since I looked at that ticket. Was it too late? Or was there still time to change what was about to happen? 2 days later, I drove to Columbus. I told Jenny I was visiting an old colleague from work, which was close enough to the truth. She barely looked up from her laptop where she was browsing real estate listings. The drive took an hour and 20 minutes on Route 33. I listened to talk radio and felt almost peaceful for stretches. Richard Anderson had his office on the 4th floor of a brick building near downtown Columbus. He was 41, methodical, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd heard every version of family crisis and wasn't surprised by any of them anymore. He offered me coffee. I accepted, then I put the lottery ticket on his desk along with the Quick-Mart receipt and explained the situation without editorializing. Dick examined both items carefully. He asked questions. When had I bought the tickets? Had I signed either one? Had Tim signed his? Had any official claim been filed? I answered each question. No, I hadn't signed either ticket. No claim had been filed yet. Tim's attorney was still working on tax structuring. "This receipt shows 2 tickets purchased in sequence," Dick said, studying the paper. "With your debit card, you could establish purchase proof. In Ohio, unsigned lottery tickets are bearer instruments. Ownership is based on possession and purchase evidence." He looked up at me. "But you gave 1 ticket voluntarily to your son. That complicates things. Does it kill my claim? Not necessarily. You gave him a piece of paper as a gift. But the gift of a ticket and the gift of its winnings are 2 different legal questions, especially when the ticket was bought with your money and there's no documentation of transferring the prize rights." He paused. "The real issue is timing. If Tim files his claim before we take legal action, the commission processes it and the money moves. Once that happens, getting it back becomes much harder. How long do I have? Claims this size require original ticket submission and identity verification. With the tax planning his lawyer's doing, I'd guess 10 days, maybe 2 weeks before they submit. What do I do?" Dick set down his pen. "First, I draft a legal notice asserting your ownership interest and notifying the Ohio Lottery of a disputed claim. This doesn't freeze the prize, but it creates an official record before any claim gets filed. Second, we document everything. The receipt, your bank statement showing the card transaction, a sworn statement from you about the circumstances." He looked at me carefully. "This won't be invisible. When they get the notice, Tim and Jenny will know." I figured. "Are you prepared for that?" I looked down at the ticket, $2 of paper that had somehow become the center of everything. I thought about Martha's photo, getting moved around like it didn't matter. I thought about Jenny's voice. "We don't need you." "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." Dick started typing. He pulled up the Ohio Lottery Commission's dispute notification system and walked me through it. He showed me the form for asserting competing ownership before official prize submission. He explained that filing early created a paper trail requiring the commission to acknowledge the dispute before releasing funds. It wasn't a guarantee. It was a flag planted in the ground. Then he showed me something that made the room go quiet. He'd searched the commission's database while we talked. Tim's lawyer had submitted a preliminary registration of intent to claim 48 hours earlier. "They're moving faster than expected," Dick said. "Jenny," I said simply. He nodded. He understood without explanation. "Then we file today." Dick prepared the notice that afternoon. I signed the statement. He notarized it. By 4 p.m., the letter was sent certified mail and electronic submission to the Ohio Lottery Commission's legal department, stating that Charles Thompson, as purchaser and original holder of both lottery tickets from transaction 447-9182C at Quickmart on Route 9, maintained legal ownership interest that had not been formally transferred, requesting no prize disbursement pending dispute resolution. Dick walked me to my car. "They'll be angry." "Yes. Are you safe at home?" I thought about that honestly. Jenny's ruthless, not violent. And Tim's never raised his voice to me in his life. "Call me if anything changes." He gave me his cell number. "Don't discuss the case with them. If they confront you, just say you're getting legal advice. You don't owe them details." I drove home in late afternoon light past fields going brown for winter, and I felt clarity. I'd planted my flag. Now I'd see who came to pull it up. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. Every light in the house was on. I was still in the entryway, keys in hand, when Jenny appeared at the end of the hallway. She was holding her phone, and her expression had moved past anger into something colder. "We need to talk." Tim appeared behind her. He looked like he had as a kid when he'd broken something, guilty and scared of what came next. I hung up my coat, set my keys on the hook by the door, walked into the living room and sat in my chair. The recliner Martha had bought me for my 55th birthday that Jenny had twice tried to replace. "All right," I said. Jenny sat on the edge of the couch. Tim stood by the window, couldn't quite look at me. "We got a call from our attorney this afternoon," Jenny said. Her voice was controlled, working hard at composure. "Apparently, the Lottery Commission received a legal notice claiming competing ownership of Tim's ticket. In your name, that's right." The words seemed to hit harder than she expected. "Dad," Tim's voice was strained. "What are you doing? That was a gift." "You gave me that ticket. I gave you a piece of paper," I said. "I didn't sign a transfer agreement. I didn't file ownership papers. I have the purchase receipt with my card number, and both tickets were bought in the same transaction." "That's not how gifts work," Jenny said. "That's exactly how bearer instruments work under Ohio law," I said. Dick had given me those exact words. Jenny's jaw tightened. "This is a legal stunt. You're trying to steal money that belongs to us. I looked at her. 2 days ago, you told me to pack my things and leave my own house. You said you don't need my charity. So I decided to take your advice and stop being charitable. Silence, then Jenny leaned forward. Her voice dropped into a register I hadn't heard before. Not quite a threat, but shaped like one. Charlie, you have no idea what you're starting. We have resources now. We can tie this up in court for years. We can challenge your mental competency. At your age, a judge might be very interested in whether you're capable of sound judgment. She let that sit there. Or we can make this go away quietly. You drop the notice, we give you a generous monthly allowance, and you stay in the house as long as you want. Comfortable, taken care of. The room was quiet, except for a car passing outside. I thought about the word comfortable, about what it would mean to accept money from Jenny. To become dependent in my own home, the allowance would be a leash, and the first time I disagreed with her about anything, I'd feel how short that leash was. No, I said. Dad, Tim moved away from the window. Please, this is our family. This isn't worth you stood in that kitchen 2 days ago, I said quietly, while your wife told me to go to assisted living. You said nothing. You agreed. I looked at him steadily. I don't know what this family is anymore, Tim, but I know what this house is. It's mine. Jenny stood up. For a second, I thought she might drop the act and speak honestly, but instead she straightened her shoulders and said, "You'll regret this," and walked out. Tim lingered. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, caught between loyalties and not brave enough to choose cleanly. "I'm sorry," he said. I wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. "Good night, Tim." He went upstairs. I sat in Martha's chair for a long time after that. The threat about mental competency was designed to scare me, and it worked a little. That's the worst kind of threat, the kind that uses your own vulnerabilities against you. I was 62, lived alone, had routines that might look eccentric to the right attorney with the right spin, but doubt isn't evidence. And I had a receipt, a bank statement, a notarized statement, and Dick Anderson. Over the next 3 days, I let myself rest. I slept, read, sat on the back porch with coffee, despite the October cold, and watched the oak trees lose their leaves. I didn't engage with Tim or Jenny beyond basic politeness. I texted Dick each morning with updates. There weren't any. On the 4th morning, Jenny made me breakfast. That's how I knew the strategy had changed. She set scrambled eggs and toast in front of me without a word, poured coffee for both of us, and sat across from me with a small, careful smile. The silk robe was gone. She wore something ordinary, a gray cardigan I'd seen before. Her hair was pulled back simply. She'd studied how to look less threatening. "I want to apologize," she said. "For the other night I was cruel, and I shouldn't have been." I looked at the eggs. They were good, well-seasoned, not overcooked. Jenny could cook when she wanted to. "Thank you for breakfast, Charlie." She folded her hands on the table. "I know we've been difficult to live with. I know I haven't always been kind, but we're family. I've been thinking, what if we started over?" "Really started over?" She paused with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed it. "The money changes everything. We could buy you a beautiful house wherever you want. The beach, maybe. Florida, somewhere warm. Fully paid, in your name. No strings." I drank my coffee. "And the legal matter? If we settle this between ourselves, keep lawyers out of it, everyone wins." She meant I'd get a house in Florida and she'd get $75 million. I looked at her across my kitchen table, in my kitchen, in my house, in the chair where Martha used to read the morning paper, and I felt something calm settle over me. "I'll think about it," I said, for about 45 seconds. Standing in my closet later, I actually considered it. A house in Florida fully paid wasn't nothing. But then I thought about what I'd really be accepting. I'd be accepting that my home, my history, Martha's memory were worth less than Jenny's inconvenience. I'd be accepting that $75 million bought the right to rewrite who owned what. I called George and told him about the breakfast offer. "She made you eggs?" George said. "And offered you Florida. Call Dick. Then come for dinner tonight. Pat's making pot roast, and I want you to meet her." That evening I drove to George's. Pat turned out to be Patricia Davis, retired Methodist minister who'd been George's friend since the 90s. She was 63, had counseled more families through money disputes than most people would believe. "People lose themselves over money," Pat said. "Even people who seemed decent before it arrived." "Jenny was never decent," I said. "The money just gave her permission to stop hiding it." George agreed. I told them everything. Pat listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, You're doing the right thing, and you're not doing it alone. This whole town watched you take those 2 and 5 years ago without complaining once. People notice, Charlie. We see what we see. The Ohio Lottery Commission's dispute hearing was scheduled 3 weeks after Dick filed our notice. Conference room, 7th floor, State Building in Columbus. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, plastic water bottles, and a mediator named Anthony Rodriguez who'd seen families destroy themselves across tables like this one. Tim and Jenny arrived with 2 lawyers. I came with Dick. Jenny wore a charcoal blazer, sat like someone who'd already decided how this ended. Tim studied the table for most of what followed. Jenny's lead lawyer, Nicholas Miller, from Cleveland, went first. Polished, methodical. He argued the ticket was a gift, cited case law, called my notice opportunistic interference. Dick placed 3 documents on the table: Quick Mart receipt, bank statement, Ohio Lottery Regulation Summary. Mr. Thompson purchased both tickets with his card in one transaction. There's no signed document transferring ownership, no witness transfer, no record establishing that beneficial interest passed from purchaser to recipient. Anthony removed his bifocals. Mr. Thompson, in your own words, what was your intent when you gave the ticket to your son? I gave him a ticket the same way I might give someone a birthday card, I said. I didn't think about prize rights because when I gave it to him, the ticket was worth $2. If I'd handed him $2 cash that somehow became worth $75 million, I don't think anyone would argue the value transformation was part of the gift. Miller started to object. Jenny put her hand on his arm. Stop, she leaned forward. This was her mistake. This is ridiculous, she said. Her professional distance was gone. He gave him the ticket. He won. End of story. He's trying to steal from his own son because we asked him to be realistic about his living situation. This is spite. This is an old man's spite dressed up in legal language. The room went quiet. Anthony put his bifocals back on. Dick said nothing. Old man, I said quietly. Tim finally looked up. His face was pale. Anthony closed by saying the commission would issue findings within 5 business days. Prize disbursement would remain suspended. Dick called on a Tuesday morning 5 days later. I was in the garden cutting back dead flower stalks. The commission ruled in your favor, he said. Purchase documentation was sufficient. They declined to process Tim's claim. I submitted my ticket on Thursday. Verification took 11 days. During those days, Tim and Jenny continued living in my house. We passed in hallways. We didn't eat together. The house felt pressurized. When the commission confirmed my claim, I gave them each a formal notice. 60 days to vacate. You're really doing this? Jenny said. After everything, I agree. They were gone in 3 weeks. Miller withdrew after reviewing the transcript. On the last morning, Tim stood in the entryway with 2 bags. This is really goodbye, he said. It doesn't have to be, I said, but it's goodbye to this version. He hugged me. I held my son back, didn't cry though it was close. Then he picked up his bags and walked out. I watched them drive away, closed the door, put the kettle on. I was alone in my house, and my house was mine. The prize, after taxes, came to about $38 million. I kept the house, had the back porch repaired, established a scholarship fund for Martha. I traveled with George to Ireland. We walked green hills, drank coffee in small towns. George said it was the best trip of his life. Tim and Jenny separated 8 months later. Tim called me in September. We talked for 40 minutes about work, weather, nothing important. Before hanging up, are you happy? I looked out at the oak trees. Yes, I said. It was true. We talk occasionally now. Honestly, more honestly than we had in years. What got destroyed wasn't love. It was the illusion that love without honesty is enough. The townspeople treat me with quiet respect now. Not because of the money, but because they watched me stand up for myself when it mattered. George and Pat come for dinner every Sunday. We sit on the porch Martha always wanted me to enjoy, talking about everything and nothing. I planted new flowers last fall without knowing if I'd be there to see them bloom. I was there. I watched them grow through spring and summer, watched them reach toward the sun in my garden, in my yard around my house. Whatever you're facing right now, whatever door someone's trying to push you through, remember this. You have the right to ask whose name is on the deed. Sometimes the answer might surprise everyone, including yourself. Family isn't about blood or shared roofs. It's about people who see your worth when you can't buy their loyalty. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them that their disrespect has consequences, because respect without boundaries is just words.